Hi, hello, and welcome to Daily Current Affairs Analysis by Shankar IAS Academy. And today's date is 30/1/2026. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And please hit on the bell icon if you want to receive instant updates on what we do. And with this, we are moving to the topics of the day. The first topic is ink, art, and India, the constitution and how it has a very cultural and artistic angle to it, and how it is significant with the 76th Republic Day. And second is India's diabetes burden. India's diabetes burden and how Tamil Nadu is the forerunner in it. US and its exit from 66 organizations, which includes the International Solar Alliance, which is from Gurugram in India, and it is headquartered here. So how will it impact India and other poor developing countries, including Africa, is what is in this article. The next is merit and in an unequal classroom, and the reservation versus merit debate, which is prominent every year, every day, and we face that on a regular basis. And the fifth topic of the day is prelims focus. So the first topic of the day is something very, very significant which came out in the Republic Day and has a lot of artistic value, which is why this news is very, very important in the UPSC perspective, both for prelims and mains. In mains, you can use this as introductions, examples. For a lot of answers, you can create a common template of introduction. We can see this in the first part of the news itself. So first, the headline is how ink, art in India came together in the Indian constitution. This article is taken from the Times of India. We are turning 76 as a constitutional republic this year, and the lesser known fact is that our constitution is the Gita and Bible of our governance. This term, the Gita and Bible of our governance, can be used anywhere in your introduction for mains. Okay, and one more line is that the best metaphor for Indian Republic is a document that speaks to the soul before it speaks to the statute. So this can be used anywhere in the conclusion. And here you see that they have given that there is 22 hand-drawn illustrations and 22 parts, making a book of law into a living tapestry of constitutional spirit. And these are things that you can, the 22 hand-drawn illustrations is something that can be asked in the prelims point of view. So now with this we are moving into the actual topic. So illustrated Indian Constitution, how the Indian Constitution was illustrated. So the Indian Constitution is a handwritten and illustrated document, one of the most bulkiest books. It contains 22 hand-drawn illustrations. Each will correspond from part 1 to part 12. And it is unique globally because this is one of the constitutions where you see text being mingled with drawings, illustrations. Why has this done? Because India had only 18% of literacy at that point, and henceforth it was not okay for a lot of people to understand and read the constitution. Henceforth, the pictorial representations might represent what the particular part is trying to tell was the idea of the makers of the constitution, which is why they integrated the art form with the calligraphic writing. Now the illustrations henceforth are not decorative, they are representations of the constitutional themes. Now the first we are going to see about is the most important topic, that is part 3 of the Indian Constitution, the fundamental rights. Here we see there is a representation of Lord Ram, Sita and Lakshman coming back from the Ayodhya after defeating Lord Ravan. You see, this is the illustration that is there, and this is the calligraphic script. And why is this done? This is done because they thought that Ram Rajya, a Rajya where rule of law took precedence, is the most important and the most significant of all, and henceforth they wanted this to be the theme of the fundamental rights, the part 3. Then what is part 1? What was there in part 1 that is more significant, because now that Indus Valley civilization is coming in news again and again, in the prelims point of view, this is very important because part 1 has the bull seal of the Indus Valley civilization. See, This is the bull seal. So part 3 has Ram Rajya, the Ram, Lakshman and Sita returning back, and this has the bull seal. The next is the artist and creation, the chief artist Nandalal Bose, assisted artist from Shanti Niketan. The calligraphy is done by Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada. So the calligraphy, if they ask you calligraphy, you have to write Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada. If they ask about the chief artist, then it's Nandalal Bose. So you should not confuse between the two. Calligraphy is something when they write in a different stylized form is what calligraphy is all about. So when they talk about writing, you have to talk about Prem Bihari. Okay, the manuscript was prepared for a period of 1 year from 1949 to 1950, and the artists were paid 25 rupees per page. This is a historical trivia. It's often asked. Here you can talk about more than remuneration. They wanted to help the constitution makers. So even though the remuneration was less, they did it. So this also can be used somewhere in your mains. So the physical preservation details, see, our constitution is something that is handwritten, hand painted, it is illustrated. So the pages, if they get oxidized fast, the pages will decay fast. Henceforth, it to prevent oxidation and deterioration, it is stored in helium filled cases, and the location of the original constitution is very important, because they can confuse you with saying it's in the Ambedkar Museum or it is present elsewhere, but actually it is present in the Parliament Library, New Delhi. So this is very important to remember. And part 3 of the fundamental rights, as already spoken, we know they wanted to talk about a Ram Raja where justice is available to all, and this is why it symbolizes the triumph of Dharma over tyranny when Ram defeated Ravan. So in part 17 of the Official Languages Act had Dandi March, which showed unity and resilience. The illustrations also include the Mohenjo-daro seals. We have already seen this. Himalayas, Nalanda for educational spirit, and a lot of freedom movement events that were very significant. One is about Naukari incident of 1946. That is also represented here. The tyranny is also represented here to show how people have been resilient with things. And the figures represented, other than that, Buddha, Mahavira, Ashoka, Akbar, Shivaji, Rani Lakshmibai, Guru Gobind Singh. There is also Lord Shiva, who is represented, his cosmic dance. It is represented in the federalism concept. Why federalism? Because the cosmic dance has something called balance, and the constitution also has something called balance. Rani Lakshmibai shows gender equality while doing the constitution. They prioritize gender equality as well. It reflects the civilizational continuity and resilience of India and balance of war and peace. So Yuddha, there is also Yuddha, there is also the element of Yuddha, war, and there is also the element of Buddha, who talks about peace. This also can be used somewhere in the mains perspective. This is the only constitution that when you talk about significance of the constitution, this is your UPSC gold, wherein you can talk about this is the only constitution that blends law, art, culture and history and visual metaphors for governance. In the governance, you talk about the Bible or Gita for governance. So constitution is culturally compact, it's not merely a legal contract. It is originally termed as India's living document. It is a cultural sense, it adapts itself to time. You can think about the beauty of the makers of the constitution, because even today when you think about it, the Indian constitution adapts itself over time, and we are able to go and revisit it for a lot of things, and still it is a living, breathing document, because we are able to analyze a lot of things. And even if it changes, even if it goes 100 years later, The makers of constitution have designed it in such a way that we will be able to analyze and interpret the constitution in a different way and adapt it to its time. That's why it's very, very significant. It's not just a judicial document henceforth. We come to the Indian Constitution's prelims practice question. So, with reference to the illustrated Indian Constitution, consider the following statements. The illustrations were added in after the Constitution came into force. No. It was added, it was done together with a calligraphy by Prem Bihari. Nandalal Bose led the team that created the illustrations. Yes. Each illustration corresponds to one part of the Constitution. Yes. The original manuscript is preserved in not National Archives of India, Parliament Library. So we know that 2 and 4 is wrong. So there's 2 here, there's 2 here, there's 4 here. So the answer should be 2 and 3 only. Can we check? Let's check. Yes, the answer is 2 and 3 only. With this, we come to the end of the first topic of the day, and let's move to the second topic. So the next topic of the day is about Tamil Nadu, and it is the global hotspot for diabetes. So let's see how the public distribution system of Tamil Nadu will be able to tackle this particular issue is the core of this particular article. Here you will have one important fact that you can see, that the studies in Tamil Nadu have shown that the carbohydrates constitute to 65% of rice, and that is because the rice has high glycemic index, which increases and shoots up the blood sugar level. So this is one important factor in this whole article. Now, India's diabetes burden. The national facts are 101 million people have diabetes and 136 million people have pre-diabetes. So India is among the global contributor for diabetes, and it has a high diabetes burden. Now, pre-diabetes is that within 4 years, if your diabetic condition is sure to turn into diabetes, then it is pre-diabetes in that angle. So diabetes prevalence is that from the year 2008 to 2010, there's 11.1%, 2002 to 2003, there's a 22.7%, there's a 104% increase. Pre-diabetes prevalence is from 12.2% to 24.8%, there is 103% increase. The absolute numbers is that approximately 12 million diabetic people and 10 million people approximately are suffering from pre-diabetes. This is the basic factor. Then rural versus urban trend. Usually when we see the lifestyle of urban India, we see food streets coming up, we see sleepless nights, we see corporate culture, we see dink culture, pub culture. With all these, we might think that urban India will have higher diabetes. But then rural India has a faster rise. So this particular indicator can be asked in your prelims point of view. And these are the data. That is, there is a 120% increase in rural Tamil Nadu is a data, but this, if they give you a statement saying rural India shows a higher level of rise of pre-diabetes than urban India, then that statement is right. You should not think that because of the lifestyle, urban India will have a higher scope. So this is one point. And the dietary factor risks that are identified is 65% of the calories come from carbohydrates, and major is from the polished rice, which has higher glycemic index. And the actual protein intake is approximately 10% and recommended by WHO 15 to 20%. Excess white rice consumption is linked to obesity, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and fatty liver disease. The typical public distribution system allocation is that you get 5 kgs of sugar, 1 palm oil pocket, 25 kgs of rice, and 1 kg of dal. This shows that there is high carbohydrate intake, and as we have seen, glycemic index is high in rice. Now the dietary diversity is also low. Now Karnataka gives more dal and it replaces rice with millets. So in this case, the Department of Food and Public Distribution and State Civil Supplies Corporations are the institutions involved. Evidence-based prevention measures is that there is a 5% reduction in carbohydrates and replaced with 5% of plant protein. So it shows the risk of diabetes being reduced. It is recommended to take fruits and vegetables 3 to 4 servings per day, and the actual intake is in Tamil Nadu is below WHO and NIN norms. So, institutions and best practices, the Horticultural Producers Cooperative Marketing and Processing Society in Karnataka shows that direct farmer to consumer linkage and affordable fruits and vegetables. The MSSRF, it found that unhealthy dietary patterns among adolescents. Tamil Nadu initiatives are noon meal scheme and school breakfast scheme. We all know about this in detail. The next is the prelims practice question with reference to the diabetes in India. Consider the following statements. The ICMR India B study shows that rural areas in Tamil Nadu have witnessed a faster rise in diabetes prevalence than urban areas. Excess consumption of polished rice is associated with the higher glycemic response and increased diabetic risk. Hopcoms is a central government scheme implemented across India to supply fruits and vegetables. No, this is not a central government scheme. And it's not implemented across India. So statement 3 should not be there. So the answer should be 1 and 2 only. Yes, the answer is 1 and 2 only. With this, we come to the end of this topic and we move to the next topic for the day. So from January 7, we see that USA has promised to withdraw itself from 66 of the most prominent international organizations which have binding and non-binding agreements, and this has created a lot of spur. With that, the US is also promised to withdraw itself from the International Solar Alliance, and henceforth, let's see how this will impact India if it does, and let's see about what next and what is threatened. So the gist, if you see, US exit will not really harm the alliance financially, but US contribution makes only about 1% of the alliance total funds. But even then, most solar projects in India are driven by domestic demand. So maybe the investors who come in to India might think that US a major backing is not there. Should I invest in this? And then it works extensively in Africa and poorer developing countries. So when large economies step back, it can create a hazard in the climate engagement. Is the gist of this article. Now let's go into detail and dissect it. It is founded by India and France. So the headquarters is in Gurugram, India. So it wants to provide affordable, accessible solar energy in all developing and tropical countries. The functions is to facilitate finance, technology and risk mitigation and capacity building transfer. The membership is 120 plus countries from Asia, Africa and Latin America are there, and it acts as a facilitator and does not build solar plants directly. How important is the US to the International Solar Organization? It joined only in 2021 and it only contributes to 1% of the total fund. So financial impact will be minimal. If even if USA goes out of the International Solar Operation, every day-to-day activities and day-to-day operations of the ISA will not get hindered is one important fact to remember. And the impact on India's solar sector. Solar manufacturing module capacity is 144 gigawatts and solar cell manufacturing is growing rapidly. India is increasingly self-reliant under domestic manufacturing policies. Solar imports from China will exist and US exits will not raise costs. This is another main point. US exit will not raise cost in the ISA. India's solar manufacturing also will not be affected. Now, most solar projects are driven by domestic demand. There is long-term contract and funding comes from Indian Bank, global funds and financial institutions. But this is to remember that US is not a main funder for the Indian solar project. So, impact on Africa and developing countries will depend on cheap international loans. So when a major economy like US will step back, the lenders will become conscious, as we already saw in the gist, and the project approvals will become very slow and the decision making takes longer. So the global cooperation and climate confidence will be affected. So this is a 2016 question. The International Solar Alliance was launched at the United Nations Climate Conference in 2015. The alliance includes all the members of or the countries of the United Nations. This is not there, so the answer will be 1 only. Let's check. Yes, the answer is 1 only. So with this, we come to the end of this topic, and then let's move to the prelims focus for the day. So this is one of the main articles for the day, and this article is taken from the Indian Express, and it's an opinion article. The article states that is there merit in an unequal classroom? UGC guidelines send a moral signal. So this article starts with a question. So when a lot of people talk about Ambedkar, when they question about what do you think of Ambedkar, a lot of people painfully describe him as the person who took away merit with reservation. So the merit cum reservation debate has always been something that is in accord. So let's look at how this happens and why this happens. So core debate revolves around is merit an unequal platform for a lot of people. See, merit quota debate persists because there are a lot of social inequality which is present in the society even today. So these unequal factors make the merit and reservation concept in a imbalance. It's not in a balanced scale. So why is this happening? See, when you assume equal competition, so let's say me and a person B is in equal competition, it ignores that the kind of school I went to and the kind of school the person B went to. Let's say that B went to a school which is comparatively lower in standards than me, and it's unequal access to schooling. And the social capital, the word social capital was given by author Pierre Bourdieu. So when he talks about social capital, he says that certain people are able to have access to certain people who are higher than them, and they are able to help these people. Let's even take the help of the word nepotism. So when you think about Bollywood, because a lot of star kids have access to social capital, they are able to get into the movies very easily. This is second one. The third one is, let's say me and the person B, both of us have mentors, but let's say that I have an access to the best mentors of the world and that person does not have an access to that. Then again, it's an unequal competition. And the kind of academic support that people in a lot of Ivy League schools have, we all have this question: why is an IIMA or an IIMB or an ISB or a MICA not equal to a Stanford or a Harvard? We also have Ivy Leagues in India, but why is it not of such prominence? And the question is because there are a lot of unequal factors, and that's why a lot of us go to education abroad. So again, this unequal access is something that you have to consider when you talk about equality. Next is, it raises a constitutional question. See, when you're ignoring so much of the structural disadvantages, do you think that merit can be assessed independent of that? Is the question. So the UGC Promotion of Equity Guidelines 2026 and the significance and the regulations. See, earlier we had the 2012 guidelines. Now the 2026 guidelines has superseded the 2012 guidelines. The objective is that it should ensure equity, dignity and non-discrimination in a higher education. So when people from certain caste backgrounds go there, they face a lot of discrimination, they face a lot of issues with respect to their dignity and their equity. So from a mere access of admissions, you might be able to get into an Ivy League, but after getting into an Ivy League, your academic survival and your academic accountability is very, very difficult. See, even today, a lot of people from the SC/ST background face discrimination. A lot of people face exclusion, and a lot of people face weak grievance redressal mechanisms. They're not even able to have their own grievance redressal mechanism inside the colleges. So now with that, there is an evidence of underrepresentation in the faculty level. That is, the faculty positions. You see that in OBC there are about 423 posts sanctioned, but only 84 are filled. In the SC/ST there are 144 posts that are allotted, but only 24 is filled. There is about 83% vacancy. And in ST, 308 posts with 111 filled, 64% work vacant. Now the inference is that reservation is not translated into proportional representation. So the proportion of representation is still unequal. This is one data point, the parliamentary data point that is you can use in your mains perspective, and this indicates that there is a structural barrier in the recruitment and it is not suitable for me. That criterion also exists and it is prevalent even today. Now, the student dropout and institution failure. There are about 13,500 SC, ST, OBC students who have dropped out from IITs, IIMs and central universities in the last 5 years. Why? Because you see about the social exclusion that happens. Even today, when we take the newspaper, we see some Dalit person being harmed, beaten, ignored, dragged in some Ivy League institution. The humiliation that he faces. We also can talk about the Amartya Sen's capability approach. So he has done to the best of what he could and he has gotten into that institution. But then when he's not on par with somebody who has already gotten a great international standard education, then the excessive academic scrutiny also makes that person feel inadequate and drop out. And there's a lack of mentoring and support systems even today. Education is something that is the root of Indian parents, but still there is a lack of mentoring and there is a lack of help from that part. So this reservation alone will not ensure equity. So when we talk about equity and equality, we know that this is common example wherein one person who is standing in a 4 feet stool and he is looking at the wall, that person has very easy access to view. Now one person who is jumping every time to view a wall which is over 6 feet, now he is trying so hard. So that is the situation when the situation is taken into account, and which is why reservation is given. Now this persistent underrepresentation in academia, judiciary, media, and elite institutions shows that even though there are quotas, even though there are formal equalities, there are a lot of pedagogical gaps. And there is invisible discrimination, hidden discrimination. Just like hidden hunger, we have invisible discrimination. And the constitutional basis is Article 14 talks about equality before law, Article 15 talks about special provisions, and Article 46 talks about the welfare of the SC, STs and the OBCs. Now with that, the ethical and governance perspective, where you see that equity is the ability to learn, participate and graduate with dignity. But then here the UGC acts as a moral signal. It says this, okay, I will protect you. I will give you a tool for institutional retrospection wherein social justice is essential for substantiative democracy. It says that if you are coming into our institution, we will try to give you that equity perspective where you get the democracy that you desire and that you deserve. Now the main practice question of the day, the debate on merit and reservation often overlooks structural inequalities with India's higher education system. Critically examine the use of UG's promotion of equity in higher education institutions, Regulation 2026, in addressing this challenge. So this is the question for the day. With the PPT that we have discussed now, you will definitely be able to answer this question. And please send us across your answer copy so that we can understand and help you aid better in your preparation. Please tag it in the comment section or the link that is given below. With this, we have come to the end of this topic and we are moving to the next topic for the day. So the prelims focus for the day, we are seeing about the international data privacy. It's observed annually on 20th January and it's designated in 2006 by the Council of Europe. Why is this happening? What is it commemorating? It is commemorating the signing of the Convention 108, that is the world's first legally binding international treaty which relates to data protection. Data Privacy Day is commemorating this, and it wants to raise importance of protecting privacy and personal data in the digital age. So the next key takeaway is that it highlights the responsibility, shared responsibility of the government and citizens to build a trusted digital ecosystem. It's the world's third largest digitized economy with digital platforms which are embedded in daily and social, economic and social life. The legal basis is that it wants to provide a citizen-centric framework which balances data privacy, innovation, and public interest. About 782 crores is allocated for cyber security, and it is to safeguard the digital and public infrastructure. That is the key takeaway. Now, Coach Award to 2025. This was in 104th Coach Summit. It has a theme that is Resourcing Vikshit Bharat. It awards individuals, projects, and institutions which are both government and private across India for their outstanding work in improving governance and development. The objective is to recognize excellence in sectors like finance, tech, health, education, and grassroots work. So, this is about the Scoach Award. Now, we come to the prelims question. Scoach Award 2025, often seen in news, is primarily associated with the excellence in governance, public service delivery, and inclusive development initiatives. It is not outstanding achievements in sports and education. It's not literary contribution. It's not scientific breakthrough. So the answer should be option A. Yes, the answer is option A. With this, we have come to the end of the prelims focus for the day. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit on the bell icon to receive instant updates. Thank you for watching. We hope you liked today's video.